Hey everybody, we are officially live. I'm so excited to dive into another pre-symposium panel. A pre-symposium panel is our lead up to our executive symposium on April 17th in Houston, where we're going to be discussing building a clear vision that drives execution. So what we have here in our pre-symposium panel is a group of leaders who are going to be at our executive symposium in a couple of weeks, sharing their insights, their knowledge, their perspectives on what they found to be effective when it comes to building a clear vision that drives execution. I'd love to have all of my pre-symposium panelists introduce themselves. Andrea, do you mind going first?
Sure. Andrea Smith. I'm the VP of Enterprise Transformation here at USA Compression. I do financial and operational performance forecasting analytics. And then I'm kind of the bridge between operations, finance, and now IT.
Very cool. Very nice. Nishat, how about you?
Hi, I'm Nishat Jones, and I am the founder of Strati8. It is a business focused around brand and digital strategy where I help B2B clients really engage and drive profitability through a client-centric approach. With that, I bring 25 years of corporate experience and operate as a chief fractional growth marketing officer and advisor to many of my clients.
Very nice. And then Ramon, how about you?
Yes, hi, I'm Ramon Soriano. I'm owner, founder of La Calle Tacos and Cantina, which is a Mexico City street food restaurant. We have 3 locations here in Houston, Texas.
Perfect. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder and CEO of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision is a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they're there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. And one of the ways that we build community is we put on these executive symposiums, bringing executives and leaders together to discuss their leadership challenges and more or less discuss a really pressing topic that they are facing with their teams. With this month's topic being building a clear vision that drives execution. So what do I mean by building a clear vision that drives execution? I think I really want to focus on the words clear and execution, because oftentimes CEOs and executive teams, when it comes to implementing a vision, a change, an initiative that they want to pursue, a merger or acquisition, it might be clear in the mind of the CEO or the board or the executive team, but oftentimes that message falls short when it comes to communicating it clearly to the rest of the organization. And they don't find out that this message wasn't clearly communicated until months and months and months later, when you're finding out individual direct reports are doing things the old way that they've been doing, and they didn't know why that the new way was mandated, and they said, screw it, I'm not doing this change. And then all of a sudden the executive team's like, great, what the heck is going on here? We're trying to get this new change initiative enacted, and not everyone's bought into it. And so ultimately it's about clarity of vision that ultimately will drive the execution we have. So Andrea, Nishat, Ramon, I would love to learn just from your experiences, what have you found to be effective when it comes to creating a clear vision? And is there ways to, or really, I mean, maybe the better question is, are there ways to level check yourself to ensure that the people you're communicating with are fully comprehending this? Because I preface this with objectivity diminishes the higher anyone goes in any organizational hierarchy, meaning as we work up, as we get that C-suite title, that SVP title, the likelihood our direct reports are going to challenge our way of thinking or question us diminishes substantially because they don't want to get fired. They have self-preservation. And I don't care how much psychological safety you think you have with your team. Ultimately, if you're the boss and you control, who gets hired and fired, they might be a little touch and go when it comes to a change initiative coming around. So what can you do to ensure that there's clarity when it comes to a change initiative being brought to the table to your team and to the organization in general?
So I'll start.
Yeah.
For us, so we're working on an ERP implementation right now. So before we even started that, we wanted to understand what is it we need. And so what we did was we brought in all of the stakeholders, all of the people who are the end users or just the supervisors of the end users. So we tried to go all the way down to the end of the chain. The people are actually going to be affected the most by this. And we said, tell us what you need, what you want. And then we said, what will be in this for you? If we did this right, how will your life get better? I recognized very quickly for us that my margins don't improve unless my end users have a better experience and their jobs become more efficient. So I had to bring it from their perspective and say, you tell me, what do you need? And how do I make your life better? And as soon as they went, ooh, she's going to make my life easier. Well, I want this gone, and I don't like doing this. And it was great. But that was one of the big things that we did, which ensured kind of the buy-in. I mean, my employees didn't care that I was like, my old system won't scale, so I can't grow exponentially, right? They could care less. But I had to then go, well, my board cares about that. So I needed to do it for them. But then on the flip side, I needed to get my end users something that would be a win for them. And that was, that ensured the buy-in. It also ensured clarity on purpose. What were we trying to build here? What were we trying to do? And it got, I think we did a pretty good job at this point. We're now in the design and build phase.
So to dovetail off of Andrea's, that's awesome, because the key stakeholder buy-in is important, right? Especially the end user. One thing that I would add to that, which is definitely something you said as well as Garrett said, it's communication. For me, it's communication at every level with every single, whatever change you're doing. And it needs to be communicated from the top, not trickle down. So what happens is the message gets changed. When we communicate something at the executive level, then we go down 1 or 2 levels, the message gets diluted, changed, it doesn't get to the end user appropriately or correctly. So I always love to see communication. So whether it's town halls, whether it's employee meetings, but don't forget your customer. So anything you're doing, make sure all stakeholders internally and externally are involved, because what I find is too many times decisions are made and communicated without incorporating your clients or your customers, which is the biggest pitfall you can generate for your own organization.
I think I agree. But I think that there's a very, very important question to ask before this question, right? And it is basically what kind of an organization have you been building, and what has happened with change, before this change coming. So if you have a culture of constant change, but that change, half of those changes get dropped in the middle of the road, which happens a lot, then you don't have a lot of chances of succeeding on the next one. No, you'll be coming to, okay, the next, this is the next good thing. It's an important one, but it's a very common cliche. The only constant is change, and you really need to pick your battles when you're going to go ahead and drive and start driving that change.
Man, Ramon, I love that point. I think that is actually one of the most critical points that is almost never brought up, which is, why is the change being brought in the first place? And what's our history with change? And at least acknowledging it. I think that is so powerful, because so often, especially when it comes to change initiatives, we act like as if the past didn't exist. Like as if the scar tissue that might have been created from previous change initiatives or layoffs or reductions in forces or mergers or acquisitions or whatever we've done, we oftentimes act like as if like just dirt off our shoulder, like no big deal. It's just, that's in the past, like vision forward. But if we don't acknowledge that, we are much less likely to succeed, because to your point, if we've had a lot of changes occur over the course of, let's say, the last 2 to 3 years, why would I, as an individual direct report who's very comfortable with the way things are operating now, change to some new initiative when I know that we've made a change and a flip-flop back and forth 5 times over the last 3 years? Like, this is my emotional investment. This is the boy who cried wolf right now to me, and I don't have the patience or time or just interest in making this change when I have a strong feeling in 5 months we're going to flip back to this previous way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question with that is, and Andrew, you kind of talk about it with like communication in terms of communicating to your audience, not whatever your personal why is, which I think is great. But I guess the question I have is, how can we go about getting that buy-in, especially if we had made a lot of changes recently? Like, let's say we've been brought in and we're relatively new to this organization, but over the last 3 to 5 years, I know I'm the third or fourth person that's been in this role, that's in a pretty senior executive role in our organization. And they're like, are you my new mentor or are you my new boss? And they don't know how to like embrace you or not to embrace you because there's so much change going on. How can you, as a new leader, acknowledge what's happened in the past, but get the buy-in that this is going to be change and going to be a change that is permanent?
For me, it's just acknowledging it. There is such thing as change fatigue, right? You know, we ask our people to do something and then we go, oh, and here's a new system. And then 3 months later, oh, and here's a new additional system. You got to learn this one too. And here's a new login and here's a, right. There is such thing as change fatigue. People get tired of it. And especially if they see no value in the changes, or they see limited value, or it adds complexity, or, you know, just burdensome, you know, requests to their work and the way they work, it gets to be too much. And I think you ask them, you go, look, I know I'm asking for this change. This is why I think it's important. This is what we're doing here. This is why we want it. The other big important thing to me, especially if I'm delegating a lot, is that I'm not playing like the Nishat point, playing telephone, right? You tell somebody, they tell somebody, they tell somebody. By the time it gets all the way down the line, it's a completely different message. That's one piece. The other of it is, I also don't believe in playing right rock, which is, you know, I ask you to go get a rock and then I go, no. I don't want a white rock. I want a black rock. And like, but I didn't clarify that. I only told you to get a rock, right? So it's got to be super clear, both the reasoning as to why and what we're actually asking for. And then the other piece of it is, as I said, it's, you know, communicating that and then asking for their feedback and go, if you've done this before and it didn't work, tell me why it didn't work, right? I mean, I've seen it in so many reorgs. It's like a new regime comes in and they're like, we're going to go do this. And we're like, we did that 2 years ago and it was a disaster, but okay, we'll try it again, right? So, you know, I get the thing, but as I said, I think it just has to really be acknowledged and talked through, because at the end of the day, if it's the right answer, you still got to go forward and do the change. You just have to make them feel good about it, or at least accepting of it.
So having lived through change and working in private equity for about the last 5 years in my corporate career, I'm going to somewhat disagree with you, Andrea, because being on both sides, coming in as a chief marketing officer and having gone through 2 CEOs within a 5-month period, it was horrific. We're going to talk about change, and we went through change every day, new leadership team, new HR, no integrations. It was on and on. I could go on about all the issues and challenges we had. But the issue started at the very top. It was that CEO that came in and, right, they would try to implement new things. They would come in and acknowledge and let you know that they wanted to make change, but it didn't work because they had been through this. And I mean, you make a great point. We did this 2 years ago. Why are we doing it again? Why do you think this is going to succeed? I think to Ramon's perspective too, if you know a restaurant exists here and they go out of business and you come in and you bring in your business, the exact same kind of food, typically it doesn't succeed again, right? So you go through these cycles of people just getting burnt out from the change and the change fatigue. I would love to hear how this has worked somewhere, because everywhere I've gone, this CEO may or may not garner acknowledgement. They may or may not loop in everybody because they can't. You know, there's a lot of things that you can't as an executive. You can't let the entire organization know we're laying off 5% of our population, and we're laying off 5% of you in 3 months, or we're implementing. I think the best example here, is implementing new systems, grabbing everyone from the top down to the bottom, and letting them know why we're doing it. If there are problems, acknowledge the problems, take fault. Like, I'm human, say, hey, I screwed up. This didn't go well. We're bringing these people in to fix this. So if you're going to implement change, you really have to own up to it and do it well, which I unfortunately have not seen As a leader, having CEOs with me, I know that I just come in very direct and I'm like, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Would love your engagement and your feedback, and try to do focus groups and surveys. And again, same thing internally, externally. So I really have a big challenge with this one because I've never seen it done well.
I think what we all agree on is that the key is on people buying. You know, that's obviously that's what it's completely all about. And I think you know, part of because that's going to happen, and things are going to be changing all the time. And I think that stressing the real DNA of the company, the real you know, values of the company, saying Jeff Bezos says, you know, people are going to want their stuff quicker. That will never change in the company. You know, that's going to, you know, be forever. So having all of those bedrocks very, very clear, and having people understand that those bedrocks are never changed, but everything else is up for grabs, can help sometimes give some of that, get some of that buying.
I'm gonna put my devil's advocate hat on right now, just to stir the pot, because you know, Andrea, I love your point about what's in it for me, or rather, what's in it for them, for the people that the stakeholders we're trying to get buy-in. And Nishat, I love your point of like, hey, no missed stakeholders, because how often do we hear about a change coming down and someone's like, whoa, 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 why was I not consulted? Like, this materially impacts me and my team, and they're like, we've already gone through the whole stakeholder interview process. I'm not doing this again with you. But the point I'm getting at is I have seen scenarios where a leadership team has followed every step, where they'll do the what's in it for the people being impacted. And then I even see them do the next step where they say, okay, great, we're going to do a pilot. Actually, I've literally seen this with a piloted new ERP system where the people that are most impacted by this, that you feel like are the most vocal, that if you can get their buy-in, everything's going to be great, tries it. And then the pilot works. The experiment goes well. It does all the things that you think it's supposed to do. And then you go back to the team. You're like, okay, so are we ready to adopt this new initiative? And they're like, nope. You're like, what do you mean, no? Like, you tried it. You said you liked it. You thought it was good. It made your life easier. But then you're just gonna say nope. You'd rather just stick with the old way of doing things. Like, yeah, I'm just used to it, and I don't know. So how putting my devil's advocate hat on, when you encounter a scenario like that, which does happen, you're like mind boggled. You're like, you tried it, you tasted it, you said you liked it. Like, won't you want to use this on a regular basis? What do you find to be an effective way to better understand their concerns and their challenges? Because when I see scenarios like that, my initial thought is that leader didn't do a good enough job of their due diligence in the first place of really what was in it for them and what could make their life easier. But when you encounter a scenario like that, how do you handle it? How do you go about reinforcing the buy-in, or going at it in a different way?
So I'm a data person. And I find everybody in my organization, honestly, I'm turning into a data person. Because they know it's like, I come to them with numbers. If they come back to me with something anecdotal, I go, okay, show me your evidence. And I'm always like, show me the data. Otherwise, it's an opinion. So we work through that. I mean, one of the things that sometimes you're just going to have to say this has to be done, and it's for the good of the whole organization. And I get initially this change management, this learning a new system, the new processes, whatever, are going to be painful for everyone. And I get you're comfortable, but we can't grow, or we can't have XYZ, whatever that is, without changing this. And it usually is a system change, right? And then the system change comes a process change, right? We do our best to keep the business processes and mold the system to the business process, but that's not always the number one, that's not always the best answer. And number two, sometimes it just doesn't work. So you have to have that compromise, and you have to, at some point they have to realize, number one, we're not asking, we're saying this change has to come, right? But then at the same time, we're going, but help us make this less painful And if there is an upside to you, help us get to that upside, right? And there will always be an upside for it. Like we had before we started doing the ERP stuff, some of the stuff was just we had to get data correct. And there was this whole data governance thing. And, you know, I went to people and went, look, I get there's no incentive for you to do something immediately the minute you find it out. But there's an upside to the company that I now can forecast better because I have better data to rely on because it's now in the system. So as I said, there's, you know, at some point, you're never going to get 100% buy-in. You know, if you're lucky, you can get the Jeff Bezos. I love the comment, but he has a thing, disagree, then commit. At best, you can get that, right? But, you know, you won't ever get 100% buy-in. There's always going to be somebody that goes, oh, it was so much better before. You have no idea how bad this is now. And you're like, okay, well, tell me why it's bad. Maybe we can fix it or make it better or make it less painful. But you at least have to try and then understand you're never going to get 100%. I mean, if you got 100%, you're either in a 5-person organization or you're like amazingly charismatic, which I can promise you I'm not.
How do you avoid that squeaky wheel syndrome, though? Because that's something that is, I feel, very permeated within an organization. Like you're very data driven, but Andrea is your CEO, very data driven. Sometimes you see like CEOs that are like, well, Jenny down in finance said that this change sucks and she hates it. And she's been pounding the table for why we need to change back to the old way. So like, I don't know, is this really working? It's like Jenny is one person in a 500-person organization. Like for the 499, it's working great, but no one's going to give you kudos because it's much less likely to generate praise when a change is enacted. Much more likely the people that are, you know, got pitchforks out and ready to, you know, burn it all down are the ones that are going to complain about it loudly. How do you avoid the squeaky wheel syndrome and falling into that trap?
For me, probably the best tool ever written around this subject are the 4 disciplines of execution, right? And you know, the 4 disciplines like create a cadence of accountability where we there's already the buying. We already talked about it. The more you can rely and the more you can leave and go deeper and deeper on accountability with people. Now this is, you bought into it, you signed off on it. Now this is yours. This is your baby. This is your result. This is, and now go and do the same, you know, a level down, so that then everybody really owns a part of it and does not have the chance of throwing the monkey back in your back.
Well, okay, playing devil, I like that, Ramon, but sometimes what happens, and I see this often, especially with like CEOs, they'll be like, okay, John Doe or Jane Doe, whoever, you're in charge of this, I give you responsibility. But I don't give them the title and I don't publicly announce that they have this responsibility. So then what happens is John Doe or Jenny Doe or whoever this person is we gave this responsibility to now goes to other teams that don't report to them and say like, hey, I'm in charge of enacting this new change. I need you to adjust the way you do things to this way. And they say, screw you, you're not the boss of me. Like, who anointed you king to make this change happen? And you're like, don't kill the messenger. The CEO told me to do this. They're like, well, I'll believe it when I see it. And then like all the mud gets stuck in the water. So when that happens, is there a follow-on step, Ramon, of saying like, hey, I'm giving you ownership and accountability, but then do you also publicly say this to everybody in the organization? Like, hey, when Jenny comes to you and asks you to make a change, you need to abide. I don't want to hear that there was foot stomping or people, you know, having temper tantrums because, you know, Jenny, who's not their boss, is now asking them to change the way they behave.
That will take me to the discipline number 3, right? Which is the compelling scoreboard. So keep a compelling scoreboard. Make it very, very clear that this is coming from everyone, right? And this is, you know, we have it, we see it, we measure it every single day. Now, I agree 100%. I'm talking about a perfect world, right? Which we know it doesn't exist.
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm always that go-between, right? I do budgets every year, and every year people submit their numbers, and I go back and go, the CEO doesn't like your numbers, and they go, well, I'm not changing them. I'm like, okay, you go talk to the CEO, right? And they've gotten to the point now where they understand that I'm their best bridge, right? I'm playing telephone. If you tell me why you need these dollars, then I can tell the CEO why you need these dollars, and maybe or maybe not, he won't tell me to come back to you and reduce them. But you got to have that executive support. Now, maybe it's the front end of that executive support going, hey, we've got this new project, this change initiative. This is the person that's going to be leading it. They're going to be coming to you. But if the CEO doesn't have my back on doing this big change, and he's going to listen to every person that comes to him and says that I'm being mean to them and asking them to do all this extra work or asking them to change how they do things, it's never going to work. Ever. You're setting up that person for failure. And so everybody has to know that the executives, at least at some point, there has to be an executive sponsor, and that executive sponsor has to have that person's back. And if they don't, as I said, it just won't work, because at the same time, I'm nobody's boss.
No, I feel like, Andrew, when I gave that example, I was speaking directly like to you're like, I can relate to this. But how do you manage up to, again, this is for everybody, how do you manage up to a CEO that struggles with threading the fine line between CEO happy talk and wanting to be a people pleaser, but then also not wanting to be like the hammer fist down that like we're doing it this way? Because you can do it in a variety of ways. Like if you're the CEO that's the people pleaser, Andrew, to your point, you get some people that are like, oh, Andrea's making us do this, this, and this. They're like, oh, that Andrea, she's just so mean. I'll have to have a talk with her. And then the CEO goes to you, Andrea, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. You're like, no, I need you to advocate to John, whenever John comes to you and tells you that I'm being mean, and not doing it. Like, you can't be the people pleaser to everybody. But then at the same time, sometimes you get a CEO comes in and goes to this mythical John character and says, John, Andrea has full control over this. You need to abide by whatever she says. And John's like, fine, all right, just grumpy and stomping your feet. And then he's disgruntled, and maybe he's becoming disengaged because of these changes. Like, is there a happy medium ground that you could manage up to your CEO to be like, hey, this is the thread, like this is the needle we need the thread to effectively get this message across that I'm in charge of this. But at the same time, like, you're not losing all of your autonomy or control.
You just have to be careful with CEOs, right, Garrett? It's a lot of, if it's a new CEO that comes in, you don't want to look like the kiss up. But you also have to ensure that you can understand, again, they've got to create a lot of transparency across the organization as much as they can. So, get them to communicate, get them to tell. But as you meet with them one-on-one, hopefully, you can say, these are some of the things that we've had. These are some of the challenges we've had in the past. This is how the organization feels. They've got to understand. I think that the big miss here is something about culture. They've got to understand. I think Ramon talked about it, like the values, what drives the organization, what's good. And if you come in as a CEO and are going to completely disrupt that and try to create a new culture and, without understanding the past. So part of it's on the CEO and you being able to share that with them without being their best friend, but also, look, let's make this work. I need your help, and this is how I can ask for that. And taking that approach, I found works better, especially as like high performing teams. When you come together, you guys all, get together and you really are trying to drive the organization, the profitability, the culture, really focused on the customers, focused on the people, not FTEs, but think about them as people and recognize them that way. I think when you can do more of that as a CEO, that resonates better instead of just, saying one thing and then turn around and completely making a fool of yourself.
For whatever reason, when I hear that, the first thing I think about is the new CEO of Starbucks who's like, everybody needs to work from the office, but I am not going to work from the office. I will keep my home in Northern California, and I will periodically fly to Seattle to be in the office with you all, but you all need to be in that. That's for whatever reason, the first thing I think of when I think about that, Nishat, and it makes you wonder, it's like, how is no one speaking up to this guy to be like, hey, like, practice what you preach.
Yeah, but then what do? You just backlash and you have strikes and you go through, right? Like that's what he's creating. He's creating that culture, which, you know, we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, nothing like really making an effort to lock into arms with your team and go and do show what you can do. I have the benefit that it's a small organization, so I'm able to speak directly to every level of my organization, and that's always obviously a plus that large companies.
You know, we're talking about change and getting the buy-in to a new change, but at the end of the day, all change is an experiment.
It is.
How do we go about communicating to our people when we've messed up? Because, like, let's face it, any experiment runs the risk of being a failed. Like, if you're not experimenting, then you're not potentially putting yourself in the arm's length of achieving some great innovation. But every attempt that you make to innovate also represents a chance that it fails and it messes up. And now your team's like, whoa, whoa, whoa! I thought we were doing it this new way. And now you've got to communicate to them like, hey, we messed up. We thought it would work. It didn't work. Um, how do you go about setting those expectations from the very beginning when you're implementing a new change initiative? So then they're not like, okay, you know what? I'm wed to this new way of doing things. And then if you determine 6, 12, however many months later, gosh, we messed up. This was not how it was supposed to go down. And unfortunately, it is what it is. We're going to have to switch back or switch to something else. How do you go about communicating that effectively to still get the buy-in to try this new thing, but let them know like it may work, it may not work.
That's very powerful. I never heard that analogy, or I never thought about it that way. And I think you just answered the question, the own question on saying, okay, it's not the first time we're wrong. It's not the first time we make a mistake, and it probably won't be the last time. And being humble enough to acknowledge that, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, good leaders are transparent. Like, I mean, absolutely. They will, if it's a project team we're working on, it's accountability. I mean, Ramon, you nailed it with that. You have to be accountable at every level. So I messed up. Like I made this decision to do this. We now need to, change course. We need to change action, whatever it may be. Does anyone have any suggestions or recommendations? But if you have another plan, again, it's like you're almost starting all over to go back with the alignment, with the buy-in. But I would just say that transparency of saying, hey, I screwed up and this is I need your help. Make yourself vulnerable, make yourself accountable. Those are the two best qualities of any human, I would say, especially as leaders.
Yeah.
And I'll just agree completely with that. It's because that's the only answer, right? It's you have to say, look, this didn't work the way we thought it would. Whether we go back or whether we fix what's there, because there's some decisions I can never go back on, right? If I implement an entire new ERP system, but I've got one piece that's completely and utterly whatever, we got the process wrong and we got the system wrong, I have to fix that piece, right? But I can't go 100% back to my old ERP system. So, there's things that aren't reversible, but I don't think there's ever anything that's not fixable. You just have to own, look, we screwed this one up, we got to fix it.
I like it. I mean, I just, I don't know. Part of me is always wary of those things, like a great CEO where there's not a board overhanging their head can be accountable and be like, hey, I messed up. But when a lot of teams and organizations work on quarterly, sprints, if numbers don't hit, uh, unfortunately, if that a CEO takes accountability, that oftentimes is their head. So there's I forgot exactly how the story goes, but it's this story of like uh outgoing CEO hands 3 letters to the new incoming CEO. And if y'all know this, correct me the parts that I get wrong. And he's like, if you ever encounter any issues or troubles, open the first letter. And the first letter says, blame the previous CEO. You encounter issues again, open up the second letter, and the second letter says something like implement a change initiative or implement a wide-scale change within the organization. That's the part I can't remember if that's exactly right. If y'all have heard this adage, correct me if that's wrong. And then the third letter, it's like if you encounter another change or another issue in terms of as you're leading your teams, open up the third letter, and the third letter says prepare 3 letters.
I love it.
So
Yeah.
long story short, I feel like I don't know, is there a way that it's like there's psychological safety between the team to our executive team to communicate up to our CEO, but then can there be that psychological safety between the CEO and their board to communicate when, gosh, we make a mistake? And I don't know. Is there something you find to be effective? Is it over communicating? Is it, maybe Andrew, to your point, applying the what's in it for the board or to them? I think we oftentimes think what's in it for you in terms of individual contributors, but we don't think about it from a board's perspective. What do you subscribe to? What do you think is helpful when it comes to achieving grace so then the CEO can feel comfortable being accountable, which just really builds the trust for everybody in the organization?
Oh, to a certain extent, it really depends on the personality of your board.
Sure.
And you can always get a choice in that. There's some boards that, they'll be more forgiving than other boards, right? And that there's a lot of I always say choose your boss. As a CEO, if I'm going in, I'm going to talk to the board, decide if I want these guys to be my boss, right? So there's some things, just humans, right? Everything at the end of the day is a people problem, but people, you have to know what your give and take is with people you're talking to. I find the CEOs that tend to at least know the board well enough to call and, water drop is what I call it, but talk to this member and this member and this member before talking to the whole piece. So that way they get some buy-in on what they're going to say. This is how they're going to approach it, right? Our previous CEO was the founder. So that's a whole different story than our current CEO, right? So very different personalities, very different relationships with the boards. So it's, a lot of it's just, you have to kind of understand your audience and understand, am I going to get one pass to make a mistake? Am I going to get multiple passes? And if you're a public company, are the shareholders really going to forgive you if you screw up 3 times? To your point with 3 letters, right? You only get so many chances because you're playing with other people's money.
Nishat, Ramon, any thoughts on that?
I agree with Andrea said. I think you really have to understand your board. What are they driven by? What are they motivated? I've always asked those questions when I'm interviewing. What are you driven by? What are you motivated by? What have you seen as, strength or weaknesses in the past? Or if you can understand your board and you can probably get 1 or 2 of those passes, but again, looks like it depends. Are you coming into a turnaround? Are you coming into growth? Like, there's so many variables here, but if you can understand your board, your shareholders, what drives them, and it's always revenue and profitability. So the more you understand those people, because again, they're people and they're human, they don't act like they are sometimes, but if you can understand what's driving them and motivating them, and then help with I just say transparency, back to that again, communicate. You don't want to over communicate on a daily basis necessarily, but communicate, set up a cadence, and again, same thing, back to the accountability. As soon as something happens, you've got to be able to explain why it happened, who is involved, and what you will do to remedy the situation. Always come with solutions. That's the biggest thing I've learned with the board. Don't throw problems at them, think it through, come back with solutions.
I'm not pervious to a board, but I think it should be the 4th letter, the one that says prepare for letters.
I love it. Very cool. Well, Andrea, Nishat, Ramon, this has been a great pre-symposium panel. If you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I want to meet these 3 great leaders, come to the Executive Symposium on April 17th in Houston. We're going to host it at Porsche of River Oaks. We're going to have a great time continuing this conversation of building a clear vision that drives execution. Everybody, thanks for your time today.